You can't even imagine the engineering of how you open up and close anything that is 18 feet thick. And he said they just would touch the door with their index finger. Whatever this is, like the walls are reactive, the door would open. They would walk through, and he went through many of these doors. And he said, you turn around and you're staring at a perfect circle. What he has seen with his own eyes, 2 miles down under ice, are hieroglyphs that archaeologists that he was in, that was the mission, was a scientist had been in there studying all this ancient archaeology 2 miles down under the ice. And the Navy SEAL gets to walk one of these huge rooms, 9-acre rooms, ceilings. One SEAL tells me he's been there in 2012. The SEAL that I have been able to videotape, voice altered in background, he was there in 2004. So I have 2 completely different SEALs. They're describing exactly the same kind of architecture. Black basalt, symbols that the archaeologist, that the 2003 Navy SEAL, his task was to go in and do what the SEALs call extract. That's when they have somebody who is there on mission and the SEALs come to get them out, to take them someplace else. So he got to talk with this archaeologist at great length. And he said that the archaeologist compared thousands. We're not talking a few symbols. We're talking whole walls, 40 feet high, completely covered with symbols that the archaeologist says are somewhere in between Mayan and Egyptian and are neither. And that they took an instrument and they penetrated where all these thousands of symbols are, and they all go in 7 centimeters, which is about 3.5 inches. But they're thin, they're carved into this dense black basalt on an even 7 centimeters. And the SEAL said to me, in discussing with the scientist, we can't even comprehend how you would do this unless there is something that interacts literally with the molecular level of the basalt and turns it into these very refined, evenly deep symbols. The SEAL said that when you would walk into these big 9-acre rooms, they can't see supports. So imagine that you're in a 9-acre room and you're looking, there's a ceiling, but there are no supports. The SEAL who was there in 2012 independently has his own unbelievable story that I'm sharing at Awakening. Mm-hmm. He said that he was in a space and they knew by measurement of what they were doing from satellite that the ceiling was at least 80 feet high. No supports. Both SEALs tell me the same thing, that the conclusion is that the very material of which the ceilings are made is neutralizing gravity, self-activating software neutralizing gravity. It's not something that the human mind is used to seeing or even comprehending. We're not dealing at all with anything human. We are dealing with ancient extraterrestrial interactions with this planet going back probably millions of years, and this is another important part. When you ask the question, when was the last time that Antarctica was free of ice? The consensus in terms of geophysics is that you have to go back to at least 34 million years ago. There was a period around 14 million years ago where it might have heated up and become drier and then gone back to ice. But the big division is 34 to 33 million years ago. and what had been happening for the previous 70 million. That is the disconnect from Pangea, when all of the land was all hooked together, and a portion that became this roundish Antarctica starts coming down for at least 70 million years, moving south the whole time for at least 70 million and probably longer. The entire moving Pangea continent that we know as Antarctica was tropical. I can sum it up with the seal. It's the same as the physicist. The seal says, I am down 2 miles under the ice in Antarctica. We're looking at symbols and hieroglyphs that are carved 7 centimeters into pure black basalt rock. It is one of the densest, hardest substances on Earth. Comes from volcano residue. This black basalt is making up 18 feet thick doors. Symbols carved everywhere. He said, as you approach these doors, it's a technology we do not understand at all. He said, you can see that there's something on the, like you're walking, here's my right hand, here's my left hand facing you. They can see that there are black rectangles up and down on what would be the left side of this 18-foot thick. You can't even imagine the engineering of how you open up and close anything that is 18 feet thick. And he said they just would touch the door. That's all, with their index finger. Just touch. And whatever this is, like the walls are reactive, the door would open. They would walk through, and he went through many of these doors. And he said, you turn around and you're staring at a perfect circle, a ring with 12 arms, with 2 90-degree angles at the ends of each of the 12 arms. So I had taken a whole lot of images in a notebook, no front loading, no description. I just said, see, I have some geometric patterns. Can you just go through and see if there's anything that you recognize? He's turning my spiral notebook, and he stopped and he said, this is it, Linda, right here. And it's the black sun. The 20th and the 21st century, humanity has heard of the black sun in relationship to Adolf Hitler. He chose that particular pattern to represent his Nazi regime. The black sun is associated with all kinds of things, both Mesopotamian and North American. Why? What is there about 12 arms coming and doing 2 90-degree angles inside of a perfect circle? I have been doing and working on the videotape of the testimony of this seal, backlighted, voice altered, and marine. And when I wanted to say to the audience, basically, how many recognize this pattern? Have you ever seen it anywhere in any history? Help me do pattern searches. From your country in England, one of the most valuable emails I have ever received. He is a mathematician by education, but sort of independent, not with a university. He sends an email that simply says, look at the illustration below and its resemblance to the black sun, this, and then its color, it's a color representation of a Purdue University physics professor's lecture, videotaped and put on the web. And the subject, if you have electric charges and you accelerate electric charges, they now know that electric charges will begin moving near the speed of light and then at the speed of light. And as they make that acceleration, they go from charge existence, think of a photon, imagine it, they become a sphere. And physicists illustrate the motion from a charge accelerating to the speed of light and then becoming surrounded by electromagnetic fields in the shapes of sphere. The physics illustration is exactly like the black sun. They can have 24. You will find it, the physicists will put 24 instead of 12. But the very idea that this could be the antecedent, that this is the reason for the black sun pattern, that it is a law that gets non-humans, advanced intelligences that move through the universe, point to point, bending space-time, as Einstein wrote. Why would they have this? They have looked for the energy source. They cannot find anything that has wires. There's nothing that we would recognize, and yet, if it is 33 to 34 million years old, it is still sustaining a structural integrity with temperature, with pressure. And he said, when you realize that you're in a place, I'm walking. That's what Spartan 1 told me. He said, I am walking, it takes me 15 minutes to walk from one end of one room to the other. This is how big the structures are. And he said, you have light that is moving with you. You have this even temperature. You're looking up at ceilings and there is no structure that is going up. And they are maybe 33 to 34 million years old.
Are these crafts or buildings?
Well, maybe, but the idea is that these structures would be what our government has described in extraterrestrial investigations for a long time, self-activating software. That we are dealing with advanced intelligences that know how to take a wall, put in at the atomic level programming, just like we would do software in a computer, only they're doing it with structure. And both of the SEALs said, if you think about 2 miles of ice on any structure that humans could make on the earth, it would not sustain 2 miles of ice. It would collapse. The SEAL Spartan 1, who was there in August of 2003, he says that when you know that you are 2 miles down and you're looking at these ceilings that have no support structures, he said it's incomprehensible to the human mind when you know where you are and you know how much weight there is above. And therefore, the ceilings have to be some kind of self-activating software that are sustaining because they are neutralizing gravity, and there must be some change in the physics between these deep structures and all of the ice. Sort of in a way that the existence of these structures to the SEALs who have been there are living evidence of something that is not comprehensible to them. He said, when I was there to extract that scientist, and I'm looking at all of these symbols, in this dark, dark volcanic basalt, walking 15 minutes from one end of one quote-unquote room to another. Each of the facilities, 62 acres, 6 at least that he knew of. He said to me, "Linda, why shouldn't every human on the surface of this planet know about what we are going to in a military way that's 2 miles under ice in Antarctica?" And that is the everyman question. If this exists, why? What would be any possible reason for why humanity on the surface of this planet should not be told everything there is to know and show about huge architecture deep under the ice of Antarctica? Why? What is it that our government and other governments know that they don't want the surface life to know? Okay, go another step. Spartan 1, his Marine colleague, the other SEAL, they've all been exposed to the same information. They have been shown photographs that the exact same symbols that are carved in that basalt in Antarctica, they have seen photographs that we have taken on Mars, and they have seen photographs that have been taken on an interior base on the moon. And they say all of the symbols match. The implication is what I've been told by a Defense Intelligence Agency analyst in December of 1999, a meeting that took an entire month to set up. All of us had to travel. There were 3 people, including myself, and the whole goal of that meeting had to do with information that I had in Glimpses Volume 2, my 3rd book, about what abductees call resurrection technology. And these are illustrations by half a dozen people who were abductees who say that there are cloning technologies that will sustain cloned bodies inside of light, and that these are used in technologies by non-humans to access a camouflage of a human body, that by doing these clones that they can become conscious beings that move around on the earth and humans would never know. That particular work in Glimpses Volume 2 was of great interest to the man who set this meeting up with me that took a month. I know because I saw his credentials. I saw his ID card. He worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. And when we had this meeting in December of 1999, it went on for 7 hours. And he said, "My job, working for the Defense Intelligence Agency for 23 years, so 99 minus 23, when he began, was to monitor and analyze the conflicting competition of 3 extraterrestrial biological civilizations in conflict with each other on and apparently over something about this planet." In that context, in talking to me, he said these words, "Linda, our government has proof that 3 competing extraterrestrial civilizations have been using this planet as a laboratory for genetic manipulation for at least 270 million years. I asked him what the proof was. He said it would be too dangerous for me to tell you. And I said, well, 270 million years is before the time of the dinosaurs. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, one of the 3 competing groups made the dinosaurs as an 80 million plus year long experiment. And he said the part that bothers us. We think it was the ebens, the ones with the heads that are shaped like this and a pear-shaped chin, not this, but more this. He said, the ebens have demonstrated for us, meaning humans, in DIA, CIA, NSA, military, and intel, that they can move matter in this universe into another dimension or another timeline, and they do it all of the time. He said 66 million years ago, something was headed for this planet that was 6 miles in diameter. We call it an asteroid. Was it an asteroid? Were they responsible for it? He said, because it is that 6 mile wide, what we have called a scientific analysis, that it must have been an asteroid piece, 6 miles in diameter, and it plunges into what we call the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Yucatan and makes the Chicxulub crater. That's our evidence. He said, we just can't understand. That took out 95% of surface life on Earth, including all of the dinosaurs. If this was their experiment, they could have moved that 6 mile diameter object into timeline or another dimension, and there never ever would have been any collision. Mm. And he said, so what bothers us? What else can we conclude? But they did an 80 million plus year experiment. Dinosaurs. And then, is this the way they ended it? By taking out 95% of all Earth surface life. It goes back to 1983, April 9th. This is when I was working on the HBO project. Peter Gerson sets up this meeting with this Richard Doty, Air Force Office of Special Investigations at Kirtland Air Force Base. I'm supposed to go there, get some names and phone numbers of an event that happened in Ellsworth, South Dakota. But instead of names, Doty pulls out of a drawer and says, my superiors have asked me to show this to you, and it is this document, all typed, briefing paper for the President of the United States of America on the subject of unidentified aerial craft, UACs, and in the paper it had UAVs, so that was the acronym in this briefing paper. And when it got to a sentence, these extraterrestrial biological entities manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien, and the Latin was used in the sentence. And then the next 2 to 3 sentences in that paragraph were about what could only be inferred was one of the avatars in history that came 2,000 years ago. And the last sentence said, and Homo sapien killed all 3. Then the next to the last page of the paper, up at the top in a paragraph that said Project Garnet, all questions and mysteries about the evolution of Homo sapien on this planet have been answered, and this project is closed. I read that sentence over and over and over, as if my mind was going tilt between the paragraph on the avatar and the paragraph that all questions and mysteries, because what that said then is that I was reading a paper on April 9th, 1983, that all of humanity was an extraterrestrial experiment in which we existed because of manipulation of DNA already in existing primates, and that the avatar of history that had come here, and it said to teach humanity about love and non-violence, and that the last sentence was, and the humans killed all three. The next day, I was to go to a city that was in, I think it was, we were in the Alamosa area of Colorado, because I'm going from then Albuquerque up and across the border into Colorado. And I was to meet with half a dozen men who had been in communication with me on animal mutilations. And we were going to have a meeting having to do with animal mutilations. And I had flown down, and I did not rent a car. I decided to travel on a bus from Albuquerque to Alamosa, and the guys would pick me up at the bus station, and then I would fly back home. That's why I was on a bus. I didn't have to drive, which means I didn't have to concentrate in a wheel. And the whole ride of the Greyhound bus getting to southern Colorado, it was like being in some kind of an echo chamber that wouldn't stop, having to do with those paragraphs that I had read the day before. And by the time that I got to the bus station in Alamosa, and the men, it was Tom Adams and Gary Massey and David Perkins and various guys that were studying mutilations. When they met me at the bus, you would have thought that my first reaction would be, oh, you're never going to believe what happened. And instead, something in me through that Greyhound bus, I never said one thing. They didn't know where I had been. They didn't know, nothing. Something in me just shut down, slammed down. I became aware that I am now in a meeting with these men who want to investigate animal mutilations. And I have been reading about genetic manipulation by extraterrestrials to create humans. And that inside of me is all of this agitation. And yet I never spoke a word. I became aware that I'm remaining silent on what is actually boiling around inside of me. I get on a plane, I fly back to Denver. And when I got to my house, I was married, lived in Littleton, I think at that time in 82, she was born in 74, so she was about 8 years old. I got home in the evening, and we had a routine of doing prayers every night for her to go to sleep. And I came in and I was so happy to see her, and she was so happy to see me. I'm still in my clothes right from the airport. And I sat down on the bed like normal, and I started singing a song that we always sang. And then I started the prayer. Holy Father, Holy Mother, Jesus. And I found myself, I stopped. And I was overwhelmed at what was happening to me. And I caught myself. I caught that I had just done this. And I continued on. And I finished the prayer, but inside of me I realized I'm not in any way have I processed the briefing paper from the Kirtland meeting. And I hugged and kissed my daughter, and I went out and I shut the door. And my husband had gone off to, he was gone to a meeting. So when I came out, it's just me. And I've never told anybody this before, but I think it's really important that some of these things that some of us dealing with the non-human, I've been trying to share this on my YouTube channel as well. If we don't open up our own efforts to try to cope with exactly what you said, we are humans at an intersection where we have come through all these centuries of other people defining for us what God is, what a devil is, what an angel is, wars in heaven. And when I came out my daughter's door, I closed it, and I was on the second story, and there was a banister that came to stairs that went down. And I grabbed a hold of the banister, feeling like I was going to collapse. I went down to my knees and I began sobbing, vomit sobs. And I didn't want my daughter to hear. And so when you try not to make noise, when you are sobbing, it is the most horrible. You pain, and it felt horrible pain trying to keep the sobs from making noise. And what was running through my mind as I was hanging on to that banister, what difference does it make if Jesus Christ was an extraterrestrial from another star system sent here to try to help humanity, the manipulated androids of some other intelligence or extraterrestrial wars or whatever the big picture is? Christ, Buddha, Krishna, 3 avatars. They all raise the same questions. You don't understand what happens at the moment of death. He who believeth in him who sent me shall have everlasting life. And that's something about the soul of humanity is of great interest to many of the non-humans who experiment. I'm convinced humans may have been created by extraterrestrials through the manipulation of DNA in already evolving primates.